So we've been going through this kind of little series on the road to discipleship, and last week we basically asked, what does salvation, what does Christian life, what does it actually end up being? What is it for? And we discovered that the Christian life is all about freedom, that Paul tells us in Galatians that Christ, what he does on the cross and all these things, they were meant for freedom. That the life that we're supposed to live is all about freedom. And then we looked at what freedom is like. We looked at the characteristics, the qualities, what it costs, and all of these things. But one of the things that's interesting about our society that's, I think, that's Christina Rue's cackle over there. For all those on the web who look at this, I don't know if anyone looks at our recordings. That's Christina Rue and her cackle, let it be known. So what we looked at last week, but it's an interesting thing, because you guys live in a generation that's unprecedented, unlike any before. You guys live in what's called the information overload generation, as in you can find anything and everything on Google and or YouTube, to the point where if you don't know something, what does anyone tell you? Go Google it, right? Googling is a verb now, even though it's a company, right? You can find out how to do anything. You want to do a crawfish boil? Look it up on YouTube. You want to learn how to sew? Look it up on YouTube. But the interesting thing about the generation we live in, though, although we have access to as much information as anyone has ever had access to, knowing doesn't actually translate into doing, right? For instance, if all of you wanted to be super fit and all of you wanted to have like the best beach body or whatever that you wanted, you just look online and they have all the different workouts, they have all the different things. If you're into that sort of thing, you can torrent different things or whatever, right? You can get all the information that you can possibly get, but if you look around, not everybody is super fit. Knowing doesn't mean you do. You can know all the study habits and all the things that you should do, but just because you know it doesn't actually translate into doing them. So, in essence, then, knowing what freedom is doesn't actually translate into us actually living it. So today, as we look at the second half of Galatians 5, we looked at the first half last week, we want to ask a very important question. Now that we know that we're supposed to live a life of freedom, of service, of love, appreciation, celebration, and joy, all the things that Paul describes here in Galatians 5, and I think everybody would agree that all those things are good. All those things are good things to have: patience, kindness, gentleness, all that stuff. But why is it that most of the time we don't live freedom, even though we know what it is? And secondly, how do we actually live it? Right? Because knowing, I'm dating myself, but if you're a G.I. Joe fan, knowing is half the battle, he says, right? The G.I. Joe say. I think they're a little overstated. It's not even half. It's only like 10%, right? You got to actually know how to do it, and also know what causes you not to do it. So that's what we want to look at today, the second half of Galatians. We want to look at why don't we live the life? What's causing us, or what's stopping us, preventing us from living the life of freedom? And then indeed, how do we actually live into the life of freedom? Okay, so if you have your Bibles, or Patrick's going to pull it up on the screen for us, we're going to look at Galatians 5 from verse 13 on to the rest. But we're going to kind of pick and choose some of these passages. I apologize for the typo. Didn't get to give you the title and such. But if you have Galatians 5, verses 13 on, and we're going to kind of pick and choose, for the sake of time, some of these verses. So Galatians 5, verse 13, it says, "For you were called to freedom, brethren. Only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled with one word in the statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. But I say, then walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desires of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desires against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. But if you are led by the Spirit, they are under the law." And we'll stop there for now. So what Paul does here, and we want to look at this really quickly, and he does this not only in Galatians, but in all the letters, he sets up a comparison, and Paul likes to do this, right? We talked about it before. He sets up the comparison between flesh and the Spirit. He says one and the other are against each other, they're warring against each other, and he says if you live out the flesh, then you're not going to do anything the Spirit does. And if you know the rest of Galatians 5, the things of the Spirit, or things of the flesh, are, we saw last week, they're terrible things, right? And then the fruit of the Spirit are gentleness, kindness, and things that we all like. But the flesh that Paul is talking about here doesn't mean the physical body. Flesh, as Paul uses it in the context of his letters, is basically an old way of thinking, or the world's way of thinking. It's a paradigm, which is a fancy word for it, right? It's a way of thinking that I can do on my own, that I am self-sufficient, that I can have all the things that I want. If I work and do and gain, then I can get all that I have. The world is about wealth and money and power and control. If you have all those things, you're going to be just fine. Work and work and work until you have the sufficient level of power, control, money, wealth, and etc., whatever it is you're going for. The Spirit is the exact opposite. It's God's Holy Spirit, which requires then from us to let go of all things, relinquish control, relinquish and undergo a paradigm shift, a thinking attitude shift where we rely solely on the mercy and the grace of God. Remember what we talked about a couple weeks back? I am who I am because I followed you here. I do what I do because I followed you here, right? Where I'm going because I'm following you there, and so on and so forth. Rather than the way that we think and way that everyone tells you to think, which is I got here because I worked my butt off, let me tell you. Siri says, I'm not sure I understand. Right? I got here, I am who I am because I worked at it, because I was diligent, because I was hardworking, and so on and so forth. And in verse 16, Paul then lays it out very strictly. He says, but I say to you, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. He says, if you walk by the Spirit, you won't do the things that the flesh are doing. And they're complete polar opposites. They do not mix. They're like ends of a magnet. If you put them together, they repel one another. They don't mix. And interestingly, the walk that he says in verse 16 is a passive tense verb, which means basically the Spirit is leading. The easiest way to understand it is if you've ever been on a train, which train does the leading? The locomotive, the front train. The rest of the trains, are they actually doing anything? No. They just are hooked on and then they follow, right? But if you lose connection to the first locomotive train, what happens? You're left, stuck, right? That's what it means by walk. If you are hooked on to the Spirit, following Him, hooked onto Him, and letting Him lead you to wherever it is that you are going, and wherever it is that the Spirit is going, then you are not going to do the things of the flesh. But if you live according to the flesh, not only will you not enjoy freedom or love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, etc., you're going to do all these other things, which is sexual morality, impurity, sensuality, and so on and so forth. And the question is then, for us, do we want gentleness, peace, kindness, goodness, self-control, or do we want the other things, right? Now, the answer to that, I hope, is simple. We want gentleness. We want kindness. We want patience. We want goodness. We don't want all the other crappy stuff that Paul describes, right? But I find it funny that Paul is giving the church this big list, right? Do you find it funny? Because for me, the list isn't really all that helpful in some ways, right? No one in their right mind is going to take the two lists that Paul gives and argue that the one of the flesh is better than the one of the Spirit. Anybody willing to make that argument with me here? If you're in debate, anyone want to go into a debate session and say, for the sake of it, you know what? These things, right? Sexual immorality, impurity, enmity, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, things like these, that those things are way and by far better than patience, kindness, love, right? Self-control. Would you make that argument? Anybody? So I think it's fairly clear that it doesn't take a rocket scientist, or it doesn't take anyone really brilliant to figure out that the fruit of the Spirit, the list that Paul gives, is indeed better than the works of the flesh. Are we clear on that? Right? Everybody agree? Then the question is, Paul, we're not dumb people. We're all very intelligent in here. We all understand kind of right and wrong. Why give us such a blatantly obvious list, right? Have you ever thought of that? Why not talk about the things that are a little harder, right? Things that we are a little iffy about, things that seem a little more gray. These things are fairly black and white. They're fairly clear that one is good and one isn't good. In some ways, I want to ask Paul, and I'll look at him and say, hey, Paul, tell me something I don't know, because that'd be a little more helpful. But again, because Paul is Paul, and he's a very intelligent, smart man, and because this is the Bible, Spirit-inspired word, you would have to think that there's a reason why these are in here, right? And I think the reason why this list is so clearly black and white, so clearly good and bad, so clearly loving and not loving, whatever you want to do, is because Paul is trying to remind us again of one of the central themes of all the Bible, which is what I call human depravity, which is a fancy way of saying humans suck in general most of the time. Now, this is one kind of thing that we don't like to talk about. Many people like to believe that humans are generally good, or humans are good at a lot of different things, that we generally, at the core of who we are really nice people. But if that's really the argument, the Bible tells us otherwise. The Bible tells us that we do a lot of different things, and if we just look at the world around us, we see that the world around us isn't all that great. We are people who rape others. We are people who murder others. We pillage, we bomb, we steal, we lie. There is no such thing really as morals. I was with a group of people and we read a story about a mom who literally, and it's not a figurative, literally took her brand new baby girl and dropped her off and left her under a bridge. I know, cliche, right? But literally it happened. And then people around me looked around and said, what kind of a mother would do that? And I, knowing my own depravity and the rest of human, I said, anyone, including you. Push the right buttons, and you would do it too, including me. I mean, clearly, there's some times where, ask any parent, there are times in our lives where we're like, with our kids, you just, right? We're not that great. And the list is a clear reminder that we're not that great. That list of things that we think that we'll never do, clearly that's not really the case. Ask some of the college kids around here. Ask how quickly people change when they get to different places, when all of a sudden different things change. Ask how quickly things go awry, right? And so Paul's reminding us, don't forget that indeed we are all capable of this first list. And the second list is something special, right? We tend to forget a lot. But even worse, and even more kind of interesting, to me, Paul giving us this list is dangerous. Now, on the surface, you would look at it and you go, well, this list is helpful, right? Okay, I get it, Pastor. This list on the one hand is really bad, and this list is on the other hand really good. So then, knowing that one is bad and one is good, then I should strive, and clearly I can work and be diligent and get up and then make my mindset and make this kind of, have a conviction. I'm losing words here, right? Make a decision. I'm going to strive to be kind and to be patient and to be peaceful and to be joyful and all these things, but something interesting happens. Because more often than not, this list, clearly, if it was used for transformation of our lives, then all of us would be much better people than we generally are most of the time. But most of the time, even a list like this can cause us to dive further into our depravity. Let me read you a quote by John Piper. He says, for example, if our problem, or just say my problem, is that at the root of who we are, we're very proud and sufficient people, self-sufficient people, and a moral authority, like Paul tells us, then kindness and faithfulness become virtues. And so we may train ourselves to do kind things, to keep our promises so that we can be proud of ourselves and feel morally self-sufficient before God and man. Then the list of virtues would not have helped us to overcome our depravity at all. In fact, it would have deepened our sin because now we prostitute the very word of God and use it to satisfy our depraved desire. For instance, if you're a proud person, you look at that list and go, you know what, I need to stop being proud. So I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to keep my promises. I'm not going to do the things that I'm doing. Then you train yourself, and you work really, really hard, and you get to the place where all of a sudden you're starting to become more kind and more patient. Then you know what you do? The moment somebody questions that, you go, no, I'm nice. Did you see the things I did last week? Did you see what I did yesterday? 2 weeks ago I did this, 3 weeks ago I did that. How dare you call me yeah, right? Then you use it as a way of being like, no, I'm good. Clearly I'm good. Clearly I've worked well. Clearly I've changed myself. Clearly I've made a pact with my own self, made a decision to become better. And so clearly you cannot call me those things anymore. We say, look at what I've done. Look at how I've progressed. Look at how I've gotten better. And that's, if you think I'm lying, that's what happened to the Jews. They took all the laws that God gave them, and they made it a way for them to feel proud. I've kept the law, you haven't. You're a bad person, get out of my face. Get out of my face, right? I've kept all these things, I'm a righteous man, you are not. Don't come into my church. We do it in our churches. One of the college kids goes off to college and they have a terrible semester, right? And you hear all the things about all the things that they did on Facebook, and they show their face here. What is our reaction? I don't know what that's. Or you take worst case scenario, let's say one of you guys went off to college, right? And you had an off night one night, and then things happen, and then let's say one of you gets pregnant. You're going to show your face in here? Everyone's going to look at you nicely? No. Right? I'm saying? We take the things that are supposed to be good for us, and we make it a thing that we strive for, and then we end up making it more difficult. And so Paul tells us, don't. He says, step in line, get in line, hook yourself, attach yourself to the Spirit, and you're not going to do the things of the flesh. It's the only way. Stay in line, be led, be connected. It is the way that we are. We don't like not having control. We hate it, actually. And we also don't like it when people tell us that we're not very good at a lot of different things. And we also then don't like it when we give credit to God, or other people will say credit to God. So I think this is one of the primary thought processes or the mindset paradigm that causes us to not live according to the Spirit or be led by the Spirit, because we don't want to be led. We want to stand on our own 2 feet. I got to where I got to because I worked hard, because I'm smart, because I'm better than you. I studied more than you. I worked harder than you. I busted my butt a little harder than you. I woke up a little earlier than you did. I stayed up a little later than you did. And so what Paul is saying is you got to change that. You got to let that one go and attach yourself to the Spirit, which is a very humbling thing. So now that we've then maybe identified a way that we think that's harmful for us in terms of living and walking by the Spirit, then the next question is, okay, then how do we actually walk by the Spirit? How do we actually live into freedom? And I think there's 2 steps. One is to understand the nature of Christian growth, and then the second one is to crucify the flesh. And let's go over these really quickly. The question that I want to ask, and that many people have asked, is how is it that Christians change? That's kind of at the heart of what we are, right? We all want to be better. We want to get better. We want to do the things that God tells us to do. We think it's important, so we want to get there. But man, it is so just freaking hard. Or we change for a little bit and then we fall back and we revert, right? How does long, deep, lasting change happen? How does permanent, radical change happen? Now, first thing you got to notice is the comparison that Paul makes. And for all you nerds out there, if you're like me, he makes a comparison. He says, on one hand, there's the works of the flesh, right? And then there's the fruit of the Spirit. Now, if you know anything about language, what is this? What is he doing? He's creating it starts with an M. Metaphor. Now, you're comparing, a metaphor compares 2 different things, right? And he's comparing what? Deeds of the flesh and then fruit of the Spirit. Now, there's something categorically wrong with this metaphor. If you wrote this in your English essay or whatever, you would get a very bad grade because it's a very bad metaphor. You don't compare works of people to fruit. They're 2 categorically different things. Paul is, in purpose, giving you a botanical, plant, gardening, natural example. And it's not because Paul's stupid. Again, we understand Paul's one of the smartest people to have ever lived in that age, right? But Paul's purpose is very, very, very specific. And I'm helped here by Tim Keller, who basically broke down all these changes. And he says, Christian change then, and the reason why Paul uses this metaphor is 4-fold. Christian change is gradual, it's inevitable, it's internal, and it's symmetrical. And let's go through these really quickly, one by one. Again, how do we change? How does the change actually last? How does it actually stay? How is it not fleeting? And when we go, the whole quote-unquote spiritual high retreat type of thing, well, how do we get away from that and actually make these things happen for a long time? First, Christian change is gradual. I don't know if you've ever seen fruit grow. Have you ever seen fruit grow? No. Why? Because it takes a really long time. You can't just watch it. And you're like, oh, I see the apple growing. Never. Any fruit that the change is gradual, right? Or if you see a little kid, right? Like let's say college kids, right? They go off for 3 or 4 months, and then they see Mason. Most likely they're going to be like, man, Mason, I think you've grown, right? It's a common phrase, right? I think you've grown. Why the think? Because you can't really see it. Just by looking at me like, I think you've grown. I mean, you think you're taller, but you got to measure it to actually know, right? You don't see change. Change is then gradual, it's slow, and therefore you must be patient. It's one of the things that change requires. It's not always overnight. And most often it's not overnight. Things can change overnight, yes. But like fruit, change has its seasons and its cycles. I love the fact that Paul uses fruit. There's seasons of fruit. Certain seasons right now, the blackberries from Costco are absolutely delicious. I don't know what they're doing with them, but they're freaking sweet. They taste like honey. But other seasons, blackberries are nasty. They're bitter. We buy them because we're fools, not understanding the seasons. Change happens in seasons. Sometimes you have ripening seasons. Sometimes you have the harvest, and it comes out, and you see it all the time. And there are seasons where it's working, and it's doing its thing, but you won't see it. Change is gradual. Sometimes you're going to experience lots of change at a lot of times, and we love it. And then you're going to go through a dry season. It doesn't mean God is far, that you're far from God. It just means that it's a dry season. You have to handle the cycles and the seasons as they happen. Patience is key. And growth is also something that you can't feel, but you can indeed test. Again, if I ask Mason, now, Mason, how do you feel? Did you feel fast? He'll tell me, yes, I feel super fast. And he'll show me, and he'll run. Now, if I ask him 6 months from now, Mason, do you feel faster? What is he going to say? Yes, but it's just because he's proud. But does he really feel faster? Can you feel faster one day? I feel lighter today. I just feel it. I just feel lighter. I just feel faster. I know it. You can't. It's not something you can feel. You don't feel the growth. You don't feel the change that way. You can test it and you can measure it. And so change then, oftentimes, because it's gradual, you only see it during times when it's tested. Oftentimes you won't know that patience is growing in your heart or love is growing in your heart. Then you'll get put into a situation where you need it. You won't know if you're trusting God more. Then you'll be put into a situation where you need it. For me, the example is basketball. I'm a hothead. Everybody knows it. But nowadays, I'm different. So you get into a basketball setting, like yesterday we had a basketball tournament, and some guys are yelling at you because you're reffing, and a lot of you guys, you felt that kind of tension. Other times, I would have gotten really upset, and I would have gotten in your face, I'd be like, don't challenge me again. But then, you see the change that's happening. You see it happening within you. All of a sudden, you're like, holy crap, why am I so patient? Why am I so kind? Why am I so gentle? Normally, I would have just blown up at that guy. I would have wanted to fight him, take him outside, whatever, but all of a sudden, it's not. Sometimes you see it when it's tested, when it's tried. Didn't know I was capable of these things, but now I see it. Change is gradual. Secondly, then, change is also inevitable because it's the fruit of the Spirit. The question is, if we have God's Spirit living in us, how could change not be happening, right? The Spirit is potent. There's an example, apparently, of an acorn long, long ago in what was going to be a cemetery. An acorn fell off a tree and it got embedded into the ground. And then as they were doing their thing, apparently what somebody did was in a cemetery, they put a 1,000-pound piece of cinder block on top of where this acorn had been buried, somehow. Now, of course, nobody really knew that was happening, but you know what happened? Many, many, many years later, all of a sudden, that 1,000-pound cinder block, you know what happened to it? The acorn, it started growing, germinated, and it started rooting, and it grew and grew and grew. And then it started putting pressure up against the bottom of the cinder block. 1,000 pounds versus a tree. Who do you think is going to win? The cinder block? You think so. But one day, over time, the acorn tree grew so strong because it's so potent, because it's an acorn tree, it cracked the cinder block in half and then sprouted right in the middle of it. And change is like that. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. If the Spirit of God is living in you, it's going to happen. As Psalm 1 says, if you're connected to the source, if your roots are in the living water, you're going to have change. Even if it's gradual, it's always potent. Change is also then gradual, inevitable, and also then internal, right? It's internal growth. It's not external, or what Tim Keller calls mechanical growth, but it's internal and organic. Now, some of those terms might confuse you, but it's kind of like this. If I tell you that I have a bunch of bricks over here, and they all need to be put into a pile, right? What are you going to do? You're going to take the bricks, and you're going to start piling them. And when you throw or put the bricks on the pile, what are you going to see? The pile is going to grow, right? That's change and that's growth, right? But it's external growth. Internal growth is like fruit. It's inside within our hearts. It's happening inside and organically inwards. One is external, you can see it, but the other one is happening internally. I talk about this theologian all the time. His name is Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but the German guy from way, way, way back when. A guy whose church is named after. Did you know that Martin Luther is a very interesting man? We celebrate him because he's a very great Christian. But did you know for half of his Christian life, he was a fake. He tells in one of his autobiographies that he was sitting there doing work, and he had written commentaries, like the things that pastors read to help them study the Bible. He was pastoring. He was doing all these things. He had been working for so long. And then all of a sudden, one day he realized as he was sitting and reading and studying, all of a sudden he felt it, like he had a change. God became real to him. And then as he thought about it, he realized, like, what in the world is going on? He underwent a spiritual transformation many, many years after he had started. And so the thing that he started looking at, and the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we measuring our growth by the things that you do on the outside? Are we measuring your growth by the ways that you're helping people, serving others, changing others, or doing things for the kingdom? Tim Keller says this, and it struck me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. He says, the Spirit, God might be actually using your gifts and your talents, the natural gifts that all of you have, to be helping others, but there's nothing going on the inside. Because we're doing it for fame, recognition, pride, whatever the case may be. If the people around you are changing based on what you're doing, but you're not on the inside, then something is wrong. Because change doesn't happen like that, not by the Spirit. Because we're not saved by the things that we do. We are saved by faith, by grace alone. Because the fruit is a result of the faith, not the thing that goes before it. So then change is, right, gradual, inevitable, internal, and interconnected or interdependent. Now, we look at the list of the things that Paul gives us, right? Let's look at this really quickly. It's in verse 22 and 23. He says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now, what we mean by this is saying all the change is interconnected is you can't have one of the lists without having the other. For instance, peace and humility are always tied together. They're in there together, right? Anyone know what peace is? What's peace? Define. What's peace? What does it mean to be peaceful? Calm? Okay, yeah. Let's dig a little further. To be peaceful means that you don't what? You don't what? There's no conflict, but more so, you have no worry, right? Because worry causes conflict. You have no anxiety. You have no fear. All three of those things is not peaceful. Anyone been through any of those three situations? Are you peaceful? No. If I called you and said, hey, did you know, or if one of your friends called you, hey, did you know you have a paper due tomorrow and it's 9:30 p.m. and you haven't done a thing? That's not a peaceful situation, right? But then, okay, so peace is the antithesis or the opposite of worry and anxiety and fear. But what is worry? What is worry? In the Bible, worry is always connected to humility. Did you know that? And you're like, what? What do the two have anything to do with each other? Or the other way of saying worry is at the root caused by pride. And here's why. Pride is what? Pride is thinking that I know best, that I know what's good, that I know where I'm going, what I'm supposed to be doing, how I'm supposed to get there. Pride is thinking that I know better than you, I know better than God, I know better than everybody else. Don't nobody try to tell me what I know, what I don't know. I know what's good. And since that's pride, the reason why you worry, you're following here? The reason why you worry is because you know that something is about to happen and it's not the way you think it should happen, and so you worry about the way it's going to happen that's not according to the way you think it should happen. That's the only reason why you worry. Are you catching? You don't worry if you don't know anything. For instance, if you drive down I-10, if you happen to take a look, there's buildings going up all the time, right? I know nothing about construction, absolutely zero, other than things get connected to one another like I'm building Legos and then you just have to have some sort of foundation and that's it. I don't know any of the engineering, I don't know any of the mechanics, I don't know anything about construction. Do I worry about the construction? Never. Why? Because I don't know anything. But I think I know a little something about service. I think I know a little something about church. I think I know a little something about the way I'm supposed to be pastoring. And because I know, and because I think I know how it should happen, where it should happen, the way it should go, what should be said, how it should be done, I worry about those things because I think I know better than the way God is doing things. I don't worry about the trees growing outside. I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about gardening. I'm trying to learn, but it's hard, right? Peace, the peace that Christian people have, the peace that we have is because I don't know. And I'm okay with not knowing. I don't worry because I don't know. Because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen right after this. I don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. I simply don't know. And so I do not worry because it's not up to me to figure that out. So lack of pride, aka a rise in humility, equals peace. Or another example, some people, it seems, are unflappable. They can't ever be bothered about something. But sometimes those people, the reason why you look at them and be like, how come you're not ever bothered by anything? How come you're not whatever? Is because they simply don't care about anything. They're just indifferent. Or, if everything is going well in your life, do you worry? No. Good. Everything is going well. But the moment something happens, what happens? You start worrying about so many things. Where did the peace go? Well, it's because peace and joy and integrity all go together. Are you following? Or gentleness, right? Some of us are born very gentle. It's our personality. My wife is a very gentle person. Everybody loves her. She doesn't make people angry. She doesn't rub people the wrong way. I do, but she's very gentle. It's the way she's wired. But for most of the time, especially before I met Christina, I think she would agree with you that her gentleness was because she was unsure. Because she's not at peace and she worries. Because she didn't want to upset the balance. And so she was gentle by fault or by default. And we're gentle because we don't know what it means to love and to be faithful. Because to be faithful is to be loyal and to be courageous. To stick to your guns of what you know and to be faithful to your cause. But if you're gentle just because you're gentle, then you're only gentle because you don't want to rock the boat, because you don't want to mess up the system. And that's the way Christina is, and that's the way Mason is. You don't want anything to be wrong. We're conflict avoidant, so we're gentle. Or self-control and joy. Last example. Self-control and joy go together. You can't have self-control without joy. Did you know that? Now, it's a very understood common example that boys cry less than girls, right? Generally speaking. I'm stereotyping, but it's okay. But do you know why boys don't cry as much as girls? Because they're what? Say it, go ahead. Because they're not gentle? No. Kind of. But the reason why boys don't cry, as much as girls is because when we were all young, our parents, and particularly our fathers, told us, big boys don't cry. Only girls cry. Don't be like the girls. What, you a girl now? You throw like a girl. You cry like a girl. So the self-control that boys have in them not crying or not being emotional isn't because we're joyful, isn't because we're secure, isn't because we have identity, isn't because of self-control. It's because we're prideful, because we want to prove to everyone that I'm not a little sissy like that girl over there. Are you seeing the connections? But real self-control comes from joy and peace. I don't have to worry about things. I'm joyful. I'm fine exactly the way I am. I can control myself. Real and authentic, radical and lasting change is like this. It's gradual. It takes time. It has its seasons. It's inevitable, and it's constant, and it's natural. And it's always changing. It's always growing. It's organic, internal, and they're always together. And all these things put together will hopefully help us realize that we don't earn anything. It naturally happens out of us. Did you notice he calls it a fruit? You know why it's a fruit? Because fruit just happen. Do apple trees worry if they're going to have apples? No, it's just what happens. It's natural. And the second then, understanding now the way that we change, the second way to indeed live into freedom and change is to crucify the self. Now, if you know anything about crucifixion, we all know what happens at crucifixion. Somebody gets nailed to a cross. It sucks. It's bloody. It's horrific. It's terrifying. All those things. Now, most people normally don't use that kind of language. You don't tell yourself to crucify yourself. You don't tell you that you've crucified anything. It's very bad language. But in verse 24, Paul tells us, now those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Paul's not just using that just to throw it around. He's trying to be very, 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 very particular. He's creating a very striking metaphor. Again, of those stupid metaphors that Paul uses, right? He's creating a metaphor saying that we then ought to crucify our flesh. to nail to a cross very violently and horrifically and terrifyingly. That's not a word, but to take our old way of thinking, to take our independence, to take our way of paradigms, all those things, and nail it to a cross and kill it once and for all in the most violent and terrifying manner you can, so that you can live, so that you can be in step. In many ways, you can't be in step, you can't walk or be attached to the Spirit if you don't take your old way of thinking and crucify it on the cross. You got to do it. And you have to be willing to do it. To be willing to kill the thing that drives you in some ways and to put it on a cross. But you know what happens? There's a little interesting thing that happens when you crucify yourself, your flesh. You know what happens? You're always reminded that the cross will always be a symbol of what? Christ, death for me and for you. So when you crucify the flesh, you look to the cross. You crucify the flesh and you look to the fact that Jesus crucified literally his body and his flesh for you and for me. You want to know what it means to trust? You want to know what it means to be led by the Spirit? You crucify the flesh and you say, God did that so that I could follow him. You trust that that means he loves you. You trust that that means he's going to give you eternal life. You trust that that means he's going to change you. You trust that that means he's left the Spirit for you. You trust that that means that indeed he is good and we are not. You take every ounce of your energy and you look to the cross because you know you can't do anything about yourself in some ways. But you trust that if you look to the cross and if you trust it, that he will change you. Then you change. Daily pick up your cross, Matthew tells us. Do you want to change? Do you want to live into freedom? Do you want to enjoy peace and joy, kindness, gentleness, self-control, love, hope, all these things? And the first thing you got to do is to take the way that you think, the way that we've been taught in some ways, the way the world operates, and says that way leads to destruction. Say, God, I put myself in your control. I attach myself to you. Lead me, guide me. For those of you who went to Fruit Basket today, you guys read Psalm 23. To be a sheep means you're the dumbest and most insufficient animal on the face of the planet, and you need a shepherd who's going to do everything for you. To lead you, to guide you, to feed you, to water you, to shelter you, to restore you. I pray and I hope, as I invite the praise team back up and we finish, that indeed you'd be able to do so. That in your heart you would ask, do I really want to live into freedom? Do I really want to be a disciple? Because that's what it costs. But the result, life, is joy, peace, kindness, all these things that we all at heart really, really want, no? And as you do then, look to the cross. And all we have to do, even though it is hard, I know, all we have to do is take the way that we think, and the way that we process, and then crucify that. But Christ, indeed, as you look, not only just crucified all those things, he actually crucified his own body so you and I never have to. And trust in his promises, trust in his word, and know that change is going to happen. If you're going through a dry season, then know that indeed, if you are following and if you want God and you know God and you want him and you love him and you trust in him, then know that this may just be a dry season, but it's not mean he's far. It just means that there's a season of dryness sometimes. There's a season where everything's working internally and you won't see it. Maybe you're in a season of real change. You're seeing lots of fruit. You're seeing lots of different things, and celebrate and enjoy, but also know that that may fade and you may go through a cycle where it's not the harvest, where it's the winter. But in all things, friends, in all things, brothers and sisters, I pray and I hope for you that you'd be willing in your life each and every single day, in the face of all the crazy pressures and crazy things that you face, that indeed you will say, Christ is my way. Christ is the way. He is it. I'm going to attach myself to him and let him lead me, come what may, because that's what discipleship and following is all about. Then you will indeed have freedom, joy, peace, kindness, and all the things you've ever wanted and in ways you can't ever imagine, better than you can ever even fathom or imagine or dream. May that be your reality. May that be your life, and may that be what we're walking into, waking up to every single day and experiencing all the more each and every single day.